Well, Ian, thanks very much for joining us on CEO Hub. It's great to have you.
My pleasure, Alan.
Obviously, this is about being a CEO, and you're the CEO of a sporting organisation. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about how different it is being a CEO of a sporting club as opposed to an ordinary company.
Well, it's a fascinating observation and challenge to contemplate when I'm surrounded by some fantastically well-credentialed and experienced professionals on our board who are in the broader business sector. People like David Evans and Paul Little, to nominate two, whose industries and perspective cuts across a far broader context of where we're at, certainly if only measured by things like turnover. We're a very small company. We turn over about $45 million per annum. We're obviously looking to grow that. But the thing that perhaps is the first point of difference is that, notwithstanding that relatively small and modest turnover, we secure so much publicity because of the insatiable,
and also the passion of the customers, as it were.
Indeed.
The supporters of your football club are your customers in a way, and they're passionate about it in a way that perhaps other customers are not.
Indeed, there is a passion for the product that drives a level of media interest, and the rough rule of thumb is that for every journalist accredited to cover federal politics in Australia, there are 5 accredited to cover AFL football, which sort of gives you that perspective. And sometimes in the popular press, as against say the financial press, we can see it on front and back page for good or for bad, and even in the Fin Review I enjoy reading John Eales's articles and coverage on the weekend. So in one sense, Alan, it doesn't change the core disciplines of having a well-driven, well-controlled and oiled machine that drives the revenue generation of the organisation, but recognising that whilst having that discipline in a business sense, you've also got to have an enormous empathy for the product, and the product's a game, and there is a culture around the game that reflects a club ethos, and it's about striking the right balance.
But do you regard it as a product, as your product? And do you have to, or do you need to sort of temper that a little?
Well, I think that the true ownership of the product rests with the Commission in terms of the ultimate governorship, the mothership, if you like, and I think it will go down as one of the smarter business decisions of our game. And even now we see the NRL continuing to challenge themselves to perhaps replicate our model of an independent commission. So taking away the stewardship of the game away from the tribal interests. And
so that's what you're talking about. The good decision was to remove control of the game from the clubs to the Commission, to the AFL Commission.
It drives us mad from time to time, as inevitably it will, when decisions perhaps don't go our way. But if there was a critical point in the last 20 years, I don't think you could find a much more important off-field one, certainly. And then the custodianship that then goes to the game itself proper, and what happens on-field. You've got the rules of the game committee, and again, changes evolve there, and inevitably we always find a way to come up with an emotional and hysterical reaction at news of another rule change, and then years later it's like, well, what happened there? And it seems as though it's been with us forever. So we enjoy at the responsibility we have to foster the game by being a member of the league, but ultimately the responsibility that I have as Chief Executive, that David has as Chairman, is to act in the best interests of the members of the Essendon Football Club, not the shareholders, the members, the people who buy the membership tickets.
But are they your shareholders? They like your shareholders?
In essence, yeah. We're a not-for-profit entity, a not-for-profit in that we need to generate profits, but not-for-profit in that we do not distribute those profits. We reinvest them back into the organisation to deliver community outcomes.
Does the fact that the AFL itself controls the game mean that you're in effect a divisional general manager?
Good point. There are times when you might feel that way in terms of some of the frustrations, particularly with some of the the socialistic type levers that are applied in the game. For example, the draft and the salary cap, and perhaps the draft is the most telling one of all. That by definition, there's a policy that is enshrined to ensure that teams fail in order for everybody to have their turn at succeeding. And we as a football club, we were at the peak of our powers in 2000, only lost one game, an extraordinary season, win a premiership, and here we are at 2011 and haven't won one since, and outside perhaps of the grand final in 01, haven't looked like winning one. Now the system says in some respects that's good because we want other clubs to have their share. And in recent times we've seen Brisbane dominate, we've seen Geelong dominate, a sense that maybe Collingwood could dominate, and we're all trying to beat the system, which in essence is, or it's about to become 1 in 18 years, is the definition of success.
Yeah, but the way you're beating it is by investing off the field.
Correct.
You and Collingwood and so on, whole lot of money in coaching, in recruitment,
Yeah.
and that's how you're getting success. Do you think at some point the AFL will bring in a salary cap on the off-field expenditure?
It's been mooted, and you're right to hone in on that. I use the expression, Alan, if there is a part of the business where we can still flex the muscle of money, it is in things such as the off-field, whether it's the facilities, whether it's the number or quality of your personnel. There's no doubt that I think Jake Niall in The Age used this expression that he thinks our approach to our coaching department this year was to apply an economic stimulus type approach. About we can't change the playing group overnight. There are a number of other frustrations that we have. We're looking for a new facility, but that's a couple of years down the track. What can we do here and now that could bring a turnaround in our performance? And we certainly believe that a total overhaul of our coaching group was one of those examples, in an area where we could do that. Collingwood sending players to Arizona is another example, and if you like, there's an expression that increasingly is entering the vernacular of football, and it's the haves and have-nots, and that's obviously a challenge for the Commission, because we've sold a game to broadcasters, and you want a genuine sense that each and every one of the games across a 22, 3, 4 week season will be a contest.
Is your performance as a CEO really only able to be improved by winning games? Is that how you can improve the performance of the club, or are there other levers that you have to pull?
Well, it's interesting. When I always have the perhaps maybe the overly simplistic view that, and James may or may not want to hear this in one sense, but when the game starts,
James Hird being the coach.
James Hird is the coach, CEO, chairman. From our perspective, we're out of control. We're sitting there like the fans, watching and observing the game. And
you being the managers of
the management, the board. It's happening before us, and we have no ability to influence what's happening in the game. And that's ultimately, I suppose, the most public manifestation of success for many people's eyes. And there's no doubt that in a world that says where there's only one trophy to play for each year, we don't have an FA Cup type thing or a Champions League type thing to play for. We've got one trophy each year. So by the harshest definition, this year with 17 teams in the comp, 16 will fail because only one will succeed. So you have to come up with a graduated scale of other important measures of success, and part of that, Alan, is gathering the resources. Back to our earlier point, that I see my job, aside from, I suppose, overseeing the overall smooth running of the club, as a resource investigator, in gathering the resources to be able to empower the football department to do what they do better, because inevitably, a bit like Oliver Twist, they're always good at coming back each year and say, more please, sir.
Right. It's interesting, I was discussing the other day, I had a conversation the other day with a director of the Bank of England.
All right.
And the board of the Bank of England do not set monetary policy. There's a group that sets monetary policy that they don't control.
Right.
And this guy said that his job was to make sure that they had the resources they needed to set monetary policy correctly. And it sounds a bit like that's what that's your job, is to ensure that James Hird and the coaching staff and the team have the resources.
Well, it comes about, even, young Alex Brown made his debut on Friday night. I sat with his mum and dad watching the game, and Murray Brown's a Collingwood past player, and there's inevitably the overlaying of family rivalries in football is a great feature of this city and indeed our competition. But our commitment to any mum and dad is that we say, we can't tell you where your boy will finish. Only talent and his ability to be coachable, to listen, will truly reflect. But what we can do is demonstrate our commitment to ensure that he will be the best that he can be. And again, part of that is about the hardware, the buildings, the environment we put them in, and the software, the people, both from a welfare, from a development, from medical services, and ultimately right down fundamentally to the basics of coaching. And in that sense, I see that there are two people in the club, Alan, who've perhaps got the hardest jobs. And one's a very public role, the head coach, who's the person who ultimately is most held to account, because we have a thing called you talk about the stock exchange every day. We have a thing called the league ladder that comes out every week after you win or lose, and that's a very public measurement of success. And the other person is our chief commercial officer, a chap in our organisation called Richard Burnett, and his job is to go and find the money, because we do break perhaps one of the most fundamental rules of business. First rule of business, I think, I find my economics from Monash is still relevant, is that income should exceed expenditure. Right. In sport, we're very, very good at
certainly saying... Certainly is helpful if that happens.
In the long term, yes. In football, we're very, very good at saying, right, no, we're going to go, this is what we're going to spend. And we're very, very good at meeting those budgets. And then we say, now we have to go and raise that income in order to balance the books up at the end of the year. You know, with the way, particularly with the fixed nature of our contracts with players and coaches.
But what are your KPIs? I mean, what are you paid a bonus for?
My bonuses are relevant and triggered by things like the overall economic performance, and then that's broken down whether it's in sponsorship, whether that's in membership, whether that's in attendance and what that relates to in terms of gate returns, overall profitability. We've gone through this year. We look like in our budget, going through both our budget number and from a membership perspective, but also our stretch budget. So that's good in isolation. But we always continue to make the point, Alan, that whilst one part of the business might be firing and really humming, the lights will shine brighter on all of us when the whole club is up and firing. And again, Collingwood is the premiership club this year, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of a journey at Hawthorn in 2008 where everything came together really, really well for that one particular season, and an ultimate success was secured. And that's the best time for everybody to be a part of, as against worrying about individual bonuses or triggers.
So you've moved between clubs, as you say. You're at Hawthorn, now you're at Essendon. Do you think that you would be able, that your skills would be translatable into business? Do you feel like you would be able to go and run a business of a similar size that wasn't a sporting club?
I'd like to think I could, and indeed bigger, because I think in some respects, once the numbers start to add up, the rules don't change so much. I think for a long time, we as a collective group of CEOs, and we get together 3 or 4 times a year, and a lot of us are in contact throughout the year in a real sense of fellowship and support for the challenges that we face. That a lot of people perhaps were a little bit dismissive, dare I say it, of the skill sets required. I still get the odd question about what I do in the off season, as in it's only a part-time job, isn't it? And you sort of
what are all the CEOs?
You politely sort of shake that off. But I think collectively, Alan, now I think there is a genuine sense, again, because of the quality of people we're getting on the board table. And Paul Little came to us only a couple of months ago, and we had a really intensive induction for him, and he was pleasingly surprised and delighted at the extent of those briefings, but also the extent of which the businesses that we're involved in. And I think that when people like that come in and truly get a behind the scenes view, as it were, the level of respect for everybody involved in the operation grows.
And when the CEOs all get together, what do they complain about?
Oh, what would we like? Oh, lots of things. We've all got wish lists. Right about now, given that it's obviously very timely, Alan, with the TV rights having just been confirmed, and the players making their noises very, very publicly about their share. We'd always like more from a club's perspective. What would we also like? We'd like more games on better times for television. We'd like more home games against bigger, higher drawing clubs in the fixture. So there's always something to be mindful of. But I think overall, I don't think anyone can dispute that the game at the moment is in the best health it's ever been, and it continues to set standards on and off the field that make it rightly, I think, the #1 sport in Australia.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Ian. I really appreciate you coming in and talking to us on CEO Hub.
My pleasure.